been working with Gareth Owen for about 6 or 7 years, doing shows for him sort of worldwide. My job on a day-to-day basis is obviously maintaining the mix of the show and Gareth's sound design. A lot of what I do as well is maintaining cast relationship, making sure they still feel comfortable and they're happy on stage as it was left for when Gareth left the show. I have 2 people working with me backstage who look after radio mics and pit and stuff. So my job is to sort of maintain the equipment, ensuring that on a day-to-day basis everything is kept to a standard to ensure the show runs as smoothly as possible. We're using obviously the S6L, awesome console. We're using 2 DSPs. We've got the main DSP and we've got a redundant DSP. Both are kept up to date with the same firmware software. We have 3 stage racks that we're using. We have one in the pit that we use for obviously all the band inputs, and then we have 2 on stage looking after radio mics and other voice of gods, playback. We have in the console 2 HDX cards, 2 AVB cards, and we're running 2 MADI cards. The MADI cards we're using for playback from KeyLab. So in each of the stage crates, in different areas of stage, we have different input and output cards. We have a mixture of analog and AES output cards. We try and run through most of the amplifiers digitally, so we use the AES cards to reduce the ADDA conversion. We're a great believer that the less conversion and less stuff that you have between the input and the output, the better. So most things are driven down the AES route. We have analog output cards for local SPMs and Genelecs that exist around stage for DSM positions and vocal boosts. And then we have obviously standard analog cards for all the generic inputs. We also have MADI cards that we're using to drive our monitor engine backstage for our pit monitoring. Part of our setup with the S6L, we're using MADI cards and we use a MADI stream to send outputs from the console to our monitoring engine on stage, which feeds all the band's monitoring mixers. So we send 32 channels of audio directly out to the pit, and that gets fed into that system. Each band member has their own individual mixer, which is driven from the main monitor desk, and along with IMs that each member has, it gives them the best isolation and the best control of what they need to hear for the show. So with the cast on stage, they have full fallback. We send vocal and band mix to monitors on stage. The cast don't have IMs, but we're able to provide a sound and a comfortable mix that keeps them happy on a show-by-show basis. We're running 5 computers front of house, all doing different jobs. We have 2 sister computers. One sister computer is driving our D&B software, rope, which controls all the amplifiers, which enables us to tonally control what the speakers are doing. We have a second sister computer, which is dedicated to running the TC Electronics software to run in Flux. And also we have a piece of radio chat software so that I'm able to communicate to the backstage team during a show. We then have a dedicated multi-track machine that just looks after the Pro Tools. So that means I've got a dedicated machine that on a show-by-show basis I can just run a multi-track session for reference or for teaching as well. And then we have 2 Macs that are running our show control software, KeyLab. We have a main and a backup, both in sync, both kept up to date. They get fed, we have a audio switcher and a KVM switcher. So in the event that we need to switch to a backup, I can just hit a button, and then audio, MIDI control, and KVM will go over to the backup machine, and they track constantly. The great thing about the S6L system and the Pro Tools system is the integration between the 2. We're running AVB, which gives us 128 inputs into Pro Tools, which means we can basically record all the inputs directly from the console into Pro Tools on a show-by-show basis. This then gives us the ability to then use virtual Soundcheck and play back that show straight back into the inputs onto the desk. This is good for reference. If we have an issue during a show, we can look back and see what the issue was or what actually happened. If a cast member wasn't singing, or if you want to listen to a drum kit and if there's anything we want to try and retune or tidy up, we can do that. But another great feature for me that's really useful is for teaching. I've got a deputy backstage, and as part of her job, she mixes a show 2 or 3 times a week. In order for me to teach that, I use Pro Tools and Playback using Virtual Soundcheck, which means that she can mix a show like a live show would be. In the old days, you had a two-track recording, which meant you could hear the mix of the show, but not necessarily get a true feel for the show. And one thing we do in musical theatre is line-by-line mix to keep the mix as clean as possible. And when you're only mixing to a stereo feed, you can sort of try and hear where vocals are coming in and out, but you don't truly get a feel if you're clipping a line. Whereas playing back using Virtual Soundcheck, if a mic's not up, you hear a mic's not up, or if you clip a line, you clip a line, which means you can just go back and play that again until you get it right. So it's a great tool. Another great feature is that Pro Tools will take in marker locations directly from your snapshot window, which is a really useful tool because you can just locate yourself into exactly where you need to be. And it's also great for whoever's learned the show to be able to look where cues are meant to sit within the show from where I place them on the recording. If I record a snapshot with the feature of Venue Link, the marker will be put in the right location onto Pro Tools. It means that when you recall a snapshot on the desk, Venue Link will automatically put you in the right place on the multi-track recording.